Thank you all for being here today, both in person and online. This is our 21st Lex Advanced workshop. So thank you for participating. And remember, we do have a whole kind of certificate program for Lex Advanced. So you can kind of work your way up through the levels by attending these workshops. You can also work on, if you've missed a workshop, you can go back into the Lex Advanced class, which all the faculty are registered for, and go through a modularized version of the workshop to get credit for it as well. And with that, I think I'm going to hand things over to Janice to get us started. And I will say just kind of before that, our voice of the chat was supposed to be Mark today, but our voice of the chat has laryngitis. So Bart and I are going to be filling in for him. So.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today. And our workshop today is Rethinking Assessment Strategies in the Age of AI. And I believe Bart has already dropped the link to this wiki resource in the chat, but you can use this QR code to scan there. You'll see the workshop slides are there as well. And when the workshop recording is available, we will put that online as well. So this is actually our 21st Lex Advanced topic. And this builds on the skills that you all learned in the Learn Everywhere Zula course. And in particular, well, as you know, that Learn Everywhere Zula course is built around quality matters standards. And in particular, this topic here addresses two standard two in particular here, 3.1, which is the assessments measure the achievement of the stated learning objectives or competencies. And the assessments used or sequenced, varied, and suited to the level of the course. Before we dive into this, I do have one question for you. So what are the biggest challenges that you foresee in assessing student work in the age of AI? Does anyone want to share what they feel are going to be their biggest challenges with this?
We got a groan.
I think okay. Well, for me, I'm teaching math, right? So for a lot of students, they're looking up if they're using AI to look up information. My biggest challenge is convincing them to critically think through the answer that's given and be sure that it makes sense.
Okay. I was having just a little bit of audio issue hearing you, but I think you said something.
So I can relay real quick. He was just saying that especially in math, he has trouble getting students to convincing students that they should critically think through the problems instead of just getting AI to do them for them.
And verify.
And to verify that as well.
Okay. Anybody else want to share something that they feel is their biggest challenge? Going to be their biggest challenge?
On the chat, we've got Jimmy says getting authentic submissions from the students, and Levy says students losing critical thinking skills. So
okay, all right. Thank you all so much for sharing that, and hopefully when we get through today's topic, we can give you some things that you can do to assist you with these challenges. So, as we know with AI, traditional assessments are going to be challenged by AI tools. And so what we need is a redesign of our assessments that are going to maintain academic integrity as well as enhance the student learning. And so before we go too far, I want to talk a little bit about backwards design. And you may or may not have heard of this, but in course design, backwards design is a framework where you're going to begin by defining the desired learning outcomes for the students first. And then you plan your assessments to measure those outcomes. And finally, you'll choose the instructional methods and the learning activities to help the students achieve those goals. So you're going to start with the end in mind to create a more intentional and focused learning experience. When identifying the desired results for those learning outcomes, start by answering two questions. What should my students know, and what should they be able to do? And then Bloom's taxonomy is very important in backwards course design because it's going to provide that structured framework for identifying and defining your desired student learning outcomes at the different cognitive levels, right? It's crucial. It's a crucial step in the backwards design process because you're going to start by defining what students should be able to do at the end of the course, allowing you then to design assessments and instructions that are going to align with those goals. And then with AI, considerations for your assessments design could be categorized into three areas, like this traffic light. AI is not going to be permitted, or it can be used in specific ways, or maybe you would like the students to use it. They can use it as they will. But whatever the case, you should let students know what is permitted with AI. If it's not permitted, then they cannot use it, and tell them why. If it can be used in specific ways for specific assignments, then let them know that and why. Why for some and why not for others. And if they can use it, still provide them with that information as to why you're permitting them to use it. What is the goal there? Explain how it can be used effectively and ethically. I want to talk a little bit about strategies for redesigning your assessments. And this is something that was taken from the Division of Learning and Teaching at Charles Sturt University. They had 10 strategies for rethinking your assessments. And the first one was to emphasize the learning process. So focus on the learning outcomes rather than on the grades. When you focus on the students' actions throughout their learning journey, this is going to help them improve their critical thinking and self-reflection skills. And they provided a couple of examples like group projects and learning journals. And so with this, I asked AI to actually expand on this particular idea. And so you can see I use Gemini, and this is the actual prompt that I use, saying you're a higher education educator looking to rethink your assessment strategies in the age of AI. You're looking for assessment strategies that emphasize the learning process. Provide examples of some redesigned assignments or assessments that emphasize the learning process. And AI provided this as an answer to my prompt. And so basically needing to move beyond simply evaluating the final products and delve into how students got there. And so this first example here is a process portfolio. Explains the traditional approach, and then the redesigned approach here, where the student would be showcasing not just the finished pieces, but also drafts, reflections, their learning journal, a journey, challenges encountered, revisions made based on the feedback, and justifications for their choices. Provided some other examples as well, like this one, think aloud presentations, iterative design projects with reflection, Students work on a design project in stages with feedback and reflection at each stage. They document their design choices, explain the reasoning behind them, and reflect on the feedback they receive. The final grade considers not just the final product, but also iterative processes, responses to feedback, and the depth of the reflection. And then finally, these two, metacognitive journals and learning logs. And this one, peer review with structured feedback. So basically, the key considerations for process-focused assessment are going to be clear criteria, regular feedback, emphasis on reflection, and low-stakes activities. Any questions, comments on this one? No. All right. And as I mentioned, this resource listed 10 different strategies. And so the other strategies were like this one, incorporate authentic assessment. And authentic assessment is something that we've talked about before in prior workshops, where you're going to use real world scenarios to assess the student's application of their knowledge. This is going to be less susceptible to cheating because they're going to test the student's understanding rather than their ability to look up answers. Promote critical thinking. Design tasks that require analysis, evaluation, and problem solving. This is going to reduce the misuse of AI tools when you promote critical thinking. Allow students to have input in developing assessment topics. If students are actively involved in the assessment process, it's going to help them learn about assessment tasks and understand the importance in their own learning. Conduct assessments through oral presentations or interviews. It's going to make it difficult for students to use external resources, right? Create questions that require unique applications of knowledge. When you do that, it's harder for students to find pre-written answers or using AI tools. Peer assessments. Incorporate peer evaluations to encourage active learning or self-reflection. Students will gain a deeper understanding of the subject matter and the learning objectives. Low-stake assessments. Use regular low-stakes assessments to reduce cheating and provide continuous feedback. This can reduce the temptation for students to cheat on higher stakes assessments. Promote creativity and problem solving. When you integrate tasks that require creative and unconventional thinking, it helps to build skills that are hard to replicate by AI tools. And then link curriculum to real-world situations and practical experiences. Students apply understanding in real-life scenarios and cultivate competencies beyond the AI tool's capabilities to reproduce. Also, when you are looking at redesigning your assessment strategies, ensure that these are inclusive and they cater to the diverse learning needs of your students. So you can provide alternate examples and support for neurodivergent students. So does anyone have anything they want to add, comment, question, feedback for the group? How do we feel about these strategies?
I just have something to share. I mean, it looks like based on these strategies, they are undermining AI. Like I just give an example. So typically in our assessments, we have PBL, it's called problem-based learning. And also the questions are also based on the clinical aspects, clinical dimension. So I gave my complicated clinical question to AI to solve, and it would write on the mark.
Mhm.
So it was a real situation, real world situation, asking a specific question. It gave exactly correct answer, like choose a medicine or a drug, or treatment or whatever, and then there was different conditions. It was right on the mark.
Mhm.
But the question arises, like we're proposing all these things, like given a real world situation and complicated questions, right? But AI is way powerful than that. It can figure out like really crazy things. The only issue that I feel, which probably is we need to address when we are assessing a lottery, or if somebody is trying to allow AI tools in assessment, is they should have an ability to analyze what is basically AI telling you. Like sometimes AI gives you some weird something, and then that's not correct.
Right.
And also, it is also a time-sensitive issue, right? Because let's say FDA approved a drug today, probably that is not there in their system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are some limitations, But yes, there has to be more, or we have to consider that AI is way more powerful than all this.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges is that no matter what we kind of come up with, AI's, a month later is gonna, the next update's gonna kind of take it the next step as well. But I like your point also about teaching students to recognize the shortcomings of what they get out of those AI systems. If they're going to use them, then they need to, just the same way they needed to learn at some point how to recognize a bad source when they're doing research. They need to recognize if they're getting an answer from an AI, if and how it might be a problematic answer. I don't think we had anything else in the chat. Janice?
Thank you, Jay.
Yep, and I think this is me.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I'm just going to show you real quickly here a couple of different things I was doing last semester in terms of thinking about AI. I realize it's a little bit on the small side in terms of the text. The depth isn't all that necessary in terms of it, but I was teaching online last semester, and I was teaching a class on the cyberpunk genre. So it was very interesting, obviously, because AI is a common, obviously, element of cyberpunk genre. One thing I started to do, I always do these kind of research activities with the students, and it's kind of throughout the semester, increasingly more challenging kind of tasks for them to do research on, so that when we finally get to the kind of the bigger research projects, they've had experience with databases and all that sort of stuff. And this last semester, I started incorporating AI into that as well. And my thinking was really that it was not so much ways to prevent them from just using AI, but I'm really interested in normalizing generative AI as a tool that they can use. And then, like Sunil said, they need to recognize what it can do for them and also what it can't do for them. They need to recognize the problems. They need to recognize that it's not just, okay, there's the answer, I'm done, kind of thing. Right? So one activity I had them do, we were working through a very kind of challenging, complex reading called the Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway. I gave them a couple of concepts that she talks about in that reading. And I kind of gave them this research task, go find, using the library databases, recent and specific examples of one of those two concepts. And then find a second article. I find this just research in general. When I tell the students find an article, they find one article, and they kind of, okay, I'm done. It's like, hey, you know what? You could find a second source that talks about the same thing, and it might help you a little bit. So find a second article, talks about the same thing from a different source. Right? read both carefully. And then I had them go to a generative AI chatbot, right, and ask the chatbot to summarize the articles for them. And then I had them kind of go through the steps. I used the discussion board in this one so that they could see each other's work as well. And it was, this is what the AI said, and then this is what I think about the quality of the analysis, or the synthesis in this case, that the chatbot did, right? So they're using AI as a tool. They're learning to kind of think about AI as possibly a useful tool, but they're also being challenged to critically analyze the work that the AI is doing, as opposed to just accepting it outright. And then obviously doing some citations, sharing, kind of taking a look at these things as well. And that worked pretty well. Like I said, it helped us through, first of all, a really complicated reading, right? That they would not have been, they would have struggled with if I just said, hey, read this, and then talk about it. We did some research skills, but again, also they thought about the ways that AI can and cannot be relied upon with some of these things. So that was kind of one approach I took. Janice, if you can go to the next slide. This was a different approach, right? So this was basically their midterm essay, and this is kind of one of those timely things. Also, and again, it puts a little more work on us, but in terms of authentic assessments, right? This is very timely because like Sam Altman published this blog post September 23rd last year, and I had them do this essay like 2 or 3 weeks later. So it was really nice. There was not a lot of stuff out about it, right? So that it's not like they could just go to one of the chat bots and say, hey, explain this to me, because there's not a lot of kind of stuff proliferating in their systems about it. But I gave them the challenge of reading the article, responding to the article about what he had to say about the future of AI. And then I very specifically said how they could or could not use AI in the process of working on this assignment, right? And so I just plugged in this little thing that said, for the purposes of this essay, like Janice was saying, very specific about my expectations. You can use it in this way for brainstorming purposes, right? And or for proofreading and revising, right? But you may not use it to write the essay for you. And then I kind of gave that little disclaimer that said, you got to remember, whatever you turn in, you're responsible, right? So don't turn something in, get a bad grade on it, and then come back and say, well, that's what, ChatGPT told me, right? It's you're still responsible. So that was kind of a different approach, right? Same class, 2 different ways of kind of thinking about how to challenge the students to think about their use of AI. So that was me kind of working through it kind of on an ad hoc basis. I was kind of coming up with these things as I was going. This is the first time I've taught the class. Obviously, still kind of learning about AI myself and thinking about how to incorporate this. So I came out of that semester with kind of a different approach that I'm taking this semester and will continue with going forward. If you go to the next slide, Janice. So, and I've got some links on the wiki page to the original article and presentation that this grew out of. This is some work by some other academics that I've just adapted. But this is in my syllabus. This is in my Brightspace page. It's kind of a required document for the class, right? And basically now, everything I ask them to do in the class, right, it's got this coding on it. So a little bit of the iconography, color, also kind of the kind of linguistic coding as well, right? To tell them what is and what is not appropriate in terms of AI use for a specific assignment. And so this is just a more expanded version, really, of what Janice was talking about with the stoplight metaphor, right? You start with nothing's permitted, right? And then work our way all the way up to pretty much everything's permitted, right? And then there's obviously a lot in the middle as well, which, kind of caution. You can, but you got to be real careful about how you're doing it. This is kind of working pretty well. We're only I guess we're 6 weeks into the semester now, but the students are kind of getting used to it and seeing these little codes on there, and then they can jump back to the big rubric. This is something I'll kind of keep developing over the course of time, right? So I tell them what they can do, right? Tell them what they can't do, right? And then I also tell them if you do use AI in accordance with what I said you can do, this is what you also need to do. And basically, it's pretty much the same thing. You've got to give me a statement explaining how you used AI for this assignment. And then you've got to provide me with the links to the chat that you, or chats that you engaged the systems with, right? And this is the tricky one because I'm finding that a lot of the third-party tools the students are using to access some of the chatbots, like on their phones, because they're not just going to ChatGPT or Perplexity, they're using like Poe or these other apps that hit those databases, hit those systems. Those don't always provide the links. Right? So we had to have a talk at the beginning of the semester to say that you are responsible for providing me with these links. Don't come back and say, oh, I couldn't find it, right? If you're going to use one of these systems, you need to make sure that it's going to provide you with the links so that I can go, this is like checking their work. Like this is like checking their sources. Right? I can go and actually see what they said to the chatbot spit out to them. I can make sure if I really need to, if they're just copying and pasting when they're not supposed to be, those sort of things. But so far, this seems to be going pretty well. One thing I'm surprised at, so far this semester, I have not actually used the first one, the red one, because when I first put this together, I was like, oh, I'll probably have a bunch of little things where I can say you can't use AI. And then I was putting together even like their reading assignments. And then I was like, well, wait a second. What's wrong with them for my class using AI to help them kind of process the reading that they did, maybe to get kind of a help with kind of summarizing it after they've read it, to help them kind of understand it a little bit better. What's wrong with them brainstorming an idea before they sit down to actually write it? So I've been surprised at myself that I haven't actually even used that no AI one so far. Pretty much everything we've done this semester for this class, the freshman level class, has been in the orange and yellow area. And then, like I said, the links to the original work, because this has been floating around and it's kind of getting used by some different people in different ways, but best I can tell, it actually goes back to an article that was published in a journal, an open source academic journal a couple of years ago with a rough version of this. And then they had kind of a presentation where they gave actually a variety of different ways you can kind of put together a similar rubric as well. But it's all just basically around, this is what's appropriate, this is what's not appropriate. Right? And I think that transparency for us going forward is critical, like Janice said, right? Whether we're going to allow it or not allow it, we need to explain to the students what we're allowing and not allowing. And we can't just assume that they know that. Yeah, thank you, Bart, for dropping that link in there. Any questions I can answer on those examples from kind of my actual experience? If not, I'll hand things over to James.
Thank you, Jay. All right, and so I wanted to talk about how you can use Brightspace to simplify your assignment submission, evaluation, and providing feedback to the students. And so the assignments tool is a great tool. It allows you to collect and grade individual as well as group assignments. The students can upload their work by they can submit their work by uploading files, or you can use the text box that they can provide you with information. It does allow for anonymous markings, and it can be used to evaluate learning activities such as demonstrations, or presentations, or lab tests, where the students actually are not physically submitting something to you. And so I think everybody knows to get to the assignments tool right now, you go to activities and assignments in Brightspace. And this is what the assignment create edit experience looks like, where you provide the name of the assignment, your instructions for it, but then over here on the right are your 3 accordions. And in particular, in the submission and completion accordion, is where you would tell Brightspace the submission type, the type of submission. The default is actually a file submission, but as I mentioned, you can set this up so that the students would be submitting text to you. And then the other two types that don't get used very much is the on-paper submission as well as the observed in-person submission type. I also want to point out when you are using the file submission, there is a section here for allowable file extensions. And by default, it's going to default to no restrictions. But there are other allowable file extension types that are here. And they're PDF annotatable files, files with the preview, files previewed without conversion, images and videos compatible with Turnitin. And then you can also enter your own custom file types. And so, like I said, by default, when you create a new assignment, it's going to default to file submission and no restrictions. And so if, for example, you know that you want to use the annotation tools inside of the assignments tool, then it is best to come here to your allowable file extensions and choose this annotatable files. This will force the students to only submit a file type that you would actually be able to annotate on top of. And when they're actually attempting to upload the file, they will see as a part of the instructions the various file types that they would be able to submit. Same thing with Turnitin. If you're trying to use Turnitin to check their work for originality, you should choose this file type compatible with Turnitin to make sure that they don't submit something that Turnitin will not be able to check. And so with the annotatable files, when you choose that, in the evaluation and feedback accordion, this checkbox here for annotation tools is available. You need to make sure, and I think this is on by default, that the annotation tools will be available for this assessment. But like I said, make sure that you have annotatable tools here as your allowable file extensions. And so for the observed in-person submission, when you choose that from the submission type, you also have to indicate how this particular assignment will be marked as completed. And your options are that the learners can manually mark this as completed themselves. It can be marked as completed automatically when you evaluate it, or automatically on the due date. Those are your options for that. So like I said, this would be, for example, if you're the students have a presentation in class or something, they're actually not turning in anything, then the observed in person type would be great for that. On paper submission, same thing. You will have the option to indicate how it's going to be marked as completed, and your options are the same: manually by the learners, automatic on evaluation, or automatically on the due date. And then rubrics, of course, are great. It would save you time in grading if you are using rubrics, but you're not actually using the rubric tool inside of Brightspace. Then you may want to consider doing that, because it helps both you as well as the student. And so rubrics are beneficial for them. They can understand the expectations and components of the assignment. This is actually attached directly to the assignment. So when you're creating the assignment or setting up the assignment in the evaluation and feedback accordion, here is where you would actually add or attach the rubric to the assignment. You should probably create the rubric first before you attempt to add it. And when you create a rubric, it looks something like this, where you have your criteria and your levels, and you can just use the click and score to grade this and provide feedback to the students. The students can actually see this rubric. It's going to be attached to their assignment. If you haven't used AI to help you develop your rubrics, you can consider using AI to do that. And this is an example of both Perplexity as well as Gemini. These prompts are exactly the same, but consider using AI to help you develop your rubrics. We have some additional information about rubrics and how you create those and use those in Brightspace. It was one of our Lex Advanced topics, and so, excuse me, and so if you want to review that, that information is in the Learn Everywhere Zula course. You can find that in the interactive rubrics module. And so I'd just like to take a moment to check in with you and see, do we have any questions that may still be circling around in my mind? What you talked about today might have squared with what I was already thinking. I gained some important ideas. Anyone?
Kind of nitty-gritty technical question.
Go ahead.
So so basically, if you have an assignment that is observed in person or turned in on paper, you don't really need Brightspace for it, but you could make a Brightspace grade item.
Mhm.
But I've discovered that students don't do anything. It doesn't pop up as a deadline in Brightspace because no one looks at my master schedule PDF anymore. So I started using the checklist feature in order to cause the deadlines for things where there wasn't anything to submit, but they needed to be there in class, or they needed to do something I was going to grade in a different app or something like that. Anyway, so I put those in a checklist, but now you've just shown that I could also use an assignment for that. I guess the benefit of that would be making it show up as a deadline for them. Do you know anything about what's does it make any difference in how it displays on their end, whether it's a checklist deadline or whether it's an assignment deadline? Or
If you've have due dates on the assignment, then that would show up in the course calendar, as does the dates that you're putting in the checklist. So it's however, whatever your preference is.
Mhm.
What I like about using the assignments tool and the observed in person assignments is that you have the assignment and the instructions and all, and then you can just go to the assignments tool and evaluate it and then publish that. When you create it, you have created the assignment and associated it with an item in the grade book. And when you grade it, right, you just publish the grade in your grade book.
that would be a big advantage.
I've actually struggled with this a good bit because, like I said, I've been teaching a lot online, and so everything's obviously got a due date. Everything needs to be really kind of structured so that they don't miss anything. And doing the assignments, everything as an assignment, even like a reading, right, as an assignment, works pretty well. It cuts down on the clickiness, right, because they can, the checklist creates kind of another step that they need to, another layer they need to go through. But actually, my students last semester, the ones who gave me feedback said they liked the checklist model better than just the built-in due dates in the assignment.
They can check off.
Yes, they can go through and check it off. And so especially for an asynchronous class, they could kind of keep coming back. Oh, I got to do, I'm 2/3 of the way done. I'm 2/3 of the way done. So they actually liked that model, but it took a little shifting for me in terms of getting used to how it's set up. But I think in terms of what they see in terms of a due date, it doesn't matter. It just shows up as, hey, this is such and such due date. This is due at 12 o'clock. This is due at 3 o'clock tomorrow, kind of things. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, feedback?
Jimmy asked in chat, how accurate are the AI generated scores from Turnitin when assessing student work? You want to take that?
When you can.
For the AI check, in Turnitin?
Right. Well, yeah, with when you're using the AI and attempting to get it to tell you whether or not something was AI generated, there's going to be some false positives. So, just because you have a certain score, you can't really say that this definitely was generated by AI or this was not. So it's just some information that you would use.
I'm doing my vector training.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I guess I don't do that. It's really bad.
Here we go.
It's some information that you would use, but you would not use it by itself and indicate that, hey, this student must have used AI to generate this paper or this information. Were you going to add something to that, Jim?
I'll add a little more, a little less generous. I think they're very inaccurate, and they should not be relied upon at all. And the research is showing, as I like to really kind of keep emphasizing, that they find more false positives for work submitted by students of color than they do for white students. So they are also they're inaccurate, and they're also biased. And so they really should not be trusted at all right now, whether it's Turnitin or another system. There are too many false positives, and there's too many missed things. And anybody who tells you that they're accurate is not telling you the truth.
I do have a personal experience. I was writing a paper, an abstract. I said, well, let me just check, They said this is AI generated. I said, well, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's possible.
I've heard other people say the same thing, right? They submitted their own work and it came back as AI generated. So I saw another comment there from Jimmy. Yes, I will grab some of those articles and send those to you. I think we probably need to get some of them up on the wiki as well. But yes, I'll definitely get you some of those.
Any other questions, comments?
One thing I've tried, and I don't know, I came in late because I had a lot of student questions after class today. So someone may have already said this, but one strategy that I've used, kind of sneaky, but only for an assignment where AI was expressly prohibited. I put an extra thing in the prompt, and then I just made that text white. So that when you looked at it on Brightspace and the PDF, or you looked at it in the paper copy, you didn't see this item in the prompt. But if you blindly pasted your thing in there, then you got some nonsense. I mean, it wasn't really nonsense, but it was dimly related, but highly unlikely that anyone would have chosen to address this point on their own. And then when the person's assignment comes in and includes this weird tangent, then you know that they copy pasted their prompt and stuck it somewhere.
Yeah,
I've heard students can do the something about the opposite. There's the Turnitin guy was talking about ways students can try to cheat the Turnitin system by doing invisible text. Things like that. But, yeah, I mean, if you're concerned about it as a parent, that's one thing you could do, as long as they're actually uploading or copying and pasting, not just retyping it. Obviously.
No, I mean,
Like
I
if
would put it
Right.
so that when they paste my prompt.
Right.
Right.
But if they go to the
They-
chatbot and they type in the instructions themselves or a shortened version of the instructions, give you an essay that does
Then
this.
it won't be in there. It'll only work if they blindly copy and paste your whole prompt. to the thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Usually they'll probably figure out that happens.
Okay, thank you all for sharing. I do have a couple of tips for you when using the assignments tool. In the grade out of section, it's going to default to creating a new grade item in the grade book. So when you enter points here, it defaults to in grade book. If you do nothing, it's going to create a new grade item in the grade book with this assignment title. We suggest that when you're setting up your Brightspace course, that you set up your grade book first. And if you've done that, you have grade items already in there. And so what you should do is go here to where it says in grade book and click on edit or link to existing and then link to that grade item that you created. You can also copy assignments. When you do that, the associated grade item and the Turnitin settings will not be copied. And then there's also fairly recent a new copy to other courses option in assignments. So you can do those as well. Tip number 3, make sure when you're designing your assignments, you design them with accessibility in mind. You don't want to forget about that. And then a potential pitfall, if you use anonymous markings, the submitted work should not have any information in it that would identify the learner. And my second, going back to the allowable file extensions, just remember it defaults to no restrictions. And so you do have some other choices there. And so just keep that in mind. And as we wrap this up, hopefully you all do see some value in rethinking your assessment strategies in your courses. So hopefully you all are over here by the thumbs up. Okay, great. Thank you for that thumbs up. And I want to remind you that we do have that wiki resource page. And as Jay said, it looks like we're going to be dropping some more things in there in addition to a copy of the workshop recording. But you can find that here when it's ready. And one last thing, your attendance or your participation in this workshop today does earn you this Rethinking Assessment Strategies badge. This will be awarded to you in the Learn Everywhere Zula course. And just because I can, I'm going to give you some confetti. All right, as we wrap up, if you have any questions, I'm going to stop my sharing. Do we have any questions? Thank you, Lovey. Thank you all. Any last minute questions as we try to wrap up?